Hey everybody, it's Ali here from Apple to Zucchini Sports Nutrition for another Nutrition Tip Tuesday. We are talking about the insulin response today. So how consuming carbohydrates sets off this cascade of events to get blood glucose out of the bloodstream and to where it needs to go. So we're going to talk airport parking. So glucose is the car. When we eat carbohydrates, it breaks down in our system and gets to our bloodstream, and when it's glucose molecules in the bloodstream, think of these as the cars. So the bloodstream is going to be, you know, the lane at the airport where you drop people off and pick them up. It's really quick, you've got to be in and out. There's this traffic warden guy who wants you to keep moving and get out of the way. So essentially, when we eat carbohydrates and that turns into glucose, we can drive through that airport lane, and if our person isn't there to pick up, then we need to find somewhere else to go because they usher you through. So top priority is valet parking. There are limited spaces. That's car park 1, which is our liver. So priority 1 is to the liver. Valet parking only has about 100 spaces, and I say 100 spaces because there's 100 grams of carbohydrate or glucose that can store in the liver. So once that fills up, cars can't use valet parking anymore, and what happens is they get ushered along further to the short-term parking. The short-term parking is car park 2, muscles. So there's more parks here, and this is the car park that's most under construction. So there's about 400 parking spaces here, and this is where cars can go once car park 1 is full, the liver. The nice thing about this one being under construction is that if we work our muscles and build them, we've actually got more car spaces in this short-term parking for glucose to get parked. If there aren't as many spaces, if our muscles are smaller or less developed, the cars get ushered on once more and they end up in the long-term parking. And I don't know if you've ever been to the long-term parking, but you always find a spot. And that's the key here. If our car park 1 and 2, the liver and the muscle stores of glucose are full, then any extra circulating glucose from the carbohydrate that we've eaten gets stored in the long-term car park, which is our fat cells, unfortunately. So what this means is that if we have a full liver and muscle store of glucose, then any extra circulating glucose doesn't want to be in that one lane. The car park warden will just say, keep moving, keep going to long-term parking, and that's where we lay down fat tissue. So how does this relate to the insulin response? Insulin is that car park warden guy. So basically, if there are cars coming through that lane as freely circulating glucose, then that warden will go, nope, no one else can come through, I need to get these cars through. So that means no fat metabolism can occur when we have circulating glucose. It needs to be ushered off to somewhere else, and this is where it's going to go ultimately if you're not clearing these car parks. How can we clear the car parks? So the big evacuation will happen when we train, when we exercise. If we're using our muscles, what happens is this car park 2, starts to become evacuated. And after about 90 minutes of exercise or a shorter time frame of more intense exercise, that's fully evacuated. We've got another 400 spaces there. So cars don't have to end up here. They can end up here again and replenish that lost muscle store of glucose. Then once this gets emptied, valet parking, priority 1, will get emptied. And that's when we have a whole new reserve, 2 whole car parks, where glucose can then be restored rather than ending up as storage in fat cells. So that's the insulin response in terms of airport parking. The message here is that if you're eating carbohydrates not around activity, they're probably going to end up stored in long-term parking. If you're eating carbohydrates around activity, you're usually just going to be evacuating these 2 stores or car parks and replenishing them, which is super important. You need to be able to replenish what you've lost to be able to function optimally on a daily basis, but you're also fueling that activity. So carbs in and around training is a really good time to be eating most of them so that you're not laying down new adipose tissue. So that was our kind of technical lesson for today's Nutrition Tip Tuesday. I'll see you guys next week for another one. you.